Pick something small and actionable and work on it together. Do not push it down. Pick something specific, concrete, that you either understand and have questions about or don't understand at all, and ask someone to tell you what they think.
Welcome to the Team Amplifier Podcast. I'm your host, Byron Summerdahl. Here you'll be inspired by industry leaders who build flourishing tech teams. Stay tuned and prepare to be amplified.
3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, we are here with Rachel Bland. Rachel is a self-described creator and coordinator of chaos. In other words, a product wrangler. Rachel's a tech leader who is passionate about helping teams to communicate with clarity and deliver results. Rachel, can you tell us more about yourself and what you got going on?
Thanks for the introduction. Yes, I've actually been in the software industry by accident to some degree since my early 20s. I came out of a math degree, fell into a computer science degree, worked briefly as a programmer analyst at the federal government. And from there, made my way into the private sector, where I think I learned probably the most important lesson you can learn in software, which is stuff happens. Technology's changing every day. People come up with crazy ideas, crazy bad, crazy good, crazy in the middle. And at the end of the day, execution is what accounts for a lot of the result you get. And that's all people, the right people listening to each other, the right people working together, the right people hashing it out. Depending on what needs to happen, it's all about whether those people got it, were into it, and were willing to do it. And magic can happen.
I've got a question for you then. So as a product person, and also somebody with a background in programming, this question is especially, I'm sure that everybody's wondering, what is the difference between a bug and a missing feature?
I like the expression that one person's bug is another person's feature, because I have taken some seriously hard kicks as a product manager for fixing bugs that were incredibly powerful features for someone else, and that maybe weren't how it was designed, but had a really impactful purpose for the 1 to 2% of users that discovered it, or that became shadow training. Did you know that if you just do this, you can do all these other things? So it's really a matter of perspective at the end of the day. I try to classify a bug as being something that is disruptive or harmful, because it's fundamentally a creative field. And so simply because it was not intended does not make it bad.
Yeah. I think it was Bob Ross that said that something about accidents or mistakes are just happy accidents.
Absolutely. My grandfather always told me that if you haven't made a mistake, you haven't made anything. So you'd better get out there and get started. And I think you see that quite often in companies where perfection is the enemy of good. You can get something out. That's the whole agile methodology. Get something out, get feedback.
Yeah.
Find out if that disaster you just created is nirvana for someone else.
Yeah, that's good. I wanted to ask that question because I had a feeling I knew what you were going to say, and I wanted to just right off the bat endear you to all the tech leaders that are former developers, because you're speaking our language. We not every bug is really a bug. Sometimes it's a happy accident, or sometimes it's just nobody thought to say they wanted that.
It's a brilliant idea. Sometimes I have engineers I work with, and the more you can introduce them to the concept and the domain of the problem that you're trying to solve, the person you're solving it for, and how they live their lives, the constraints that they work within, that's really where you get some magic, because that's where human creativity comes. Yeah. And that, to me, is where you bridge the gap between research and development and engineering. Because in software, we try not to be doing IKEA. We don't want to get a kit with all the parts and assemble them. That's engineering. We want to discover a problem and brainstorm how we could solve that under different sets of conditions, and then see how that works. That's what makes it research and development, and that's what makes it fun.
Well, have you been reading any books lately that
Well, I'm
have made
actually
an impact on
rereading
you?
Brene Brown, number one, because it's my go to vacation read, and I just came back from the beach, but also because I'm actually specifically reading Dare to Lead. I love a lot of the sayings in Dare to Lead, like, the person in the ring getting their butt kicked. But more than anything, I like it because it reminds me of vulnerability. And I don't know if I can say this, but your shitty first draft, because some of the best ideas come from the most horrible beginnings. I think we should do this, and it should be like this and that and the other thing. And someone will come and say, just do that. And all of a sudden, you've got this wonderful thing that was easier than you thought instead of the over-engineered nightmare you may have developed. But bringing out your shitty first draft starts a conversation. It just breaks down barriers and gives people a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, lowers the expectations. We're not looking for perfection here. We're just looking for something that is
Get the ball
that gets the
rolling, right? It's
idea
like a
across.
snowball. Tiny little snowball can become a giant avalanche.
Cool. I'll check out that book and that author. Sounds pretty cool. So Rachel, we have a little thing on this show. I'm sure you've probably heard about this already. Maybe you're scared. I'm not sure. We'll see. But on this show, we like to make sure that we are humanizing our guests, just like we're humanizing tech leadership. So it's confession time. Step into my confession booth. What is the most embarrassing mistake you've made as a tech leader?
There's
Let's
a
hear it.
lot. Some of them are not necessarily fit for reproduction, but there's a fairly recent one, actually. So I've been in the industry 26 years now, not a spring chicken. And I've recently discovered that not all of my analogies transfer across generations. So depending on your vintage, you may or may not have had cereal boxes with secret decoder rings. And it was part of spycraft, and you could figure out what something said. And so I'd been working with a team, and I'd analyzed an area of the product. And when I went to describe it was fairly critical when I was playing it back to them of, okay, you need to take this many steps to get here. And so I put up a big picture of a secret decoder ring and said, like a secret decoder ring. And people are like, and they're sort of looking back and forth. And I'm in person in the room, which is not an everyday occurrence. And I had that whole flop sweat happen. Oh no. How do I find another thing? And you know how in the moment sometimes you panic? You're like, oh man, what is another humorous way to say this that this generation will understand? And I couldn't find one. So dead flop.
Yeah, I'm actually right now, I'm trying to go through my mind right now, trying to figure out if there is what would be the modern
I still
equivalent.
haven't quite figured that out.
Like it's like a
I
cipher.
mean, it's cryptic. I guess you can.
It's like a cipher, right?
Yeah, like a cipher.
It's like a cipher,
cryptic.
right?
Something that's like a maze or a labyrinth. Something that has a lot of cognitive load. And there are a lot of fancy ways to say it, but I didn't feel like there were a lot of more accessible ways to say it.
Our younger generations are just missing out. Like they're not drinking out of hoses. They're not being left outside for hours on end, and they're not getting secret decoder rings in cornflakes boxes.
I mean, we've all watched Stranger Things, right? There's some value to those core skills.
Yeah, like killing monstrous enemies.
My mom would have been
dimensions.
so much happier about me playing D&D if she had known.
Yeah. Well, speaking of talking, I don't know. I'm looking for a great segue from secret decoder rings into getting them solved. We'll just dive into it, right? So, So today we're talking about getting our teams to talk, and if you can throw out secret decoder rings to your team and try to get them to figure out what in the world we're talking about, these old analogies, that might be one way to get them to talk. But what do we mean, Rachel, by getting our teams to talk? We're trying to unpack this whole idea.
A lot of the time we get really focused on our deadlines and our goals and our big pictures, right? And I particularly see this at the top, people saying, well, we just want you to make this happen. How do you make people do something? Software is not really one of those things that I can just push on someone harder and make more software come out. In fact, it kind of works the opposite way. So one of the things I like to focus on is like, okay, people, and particularly people in software, are typically very good at telling you when you're wrong. If they think you're going to listen, and if they think you're going to understand what they're saying to you. Because if they don't think either of those two things is true, they're not going to bother wasting their energy on you. They're just going to go do what they're going to do silently and bet that you're not even going to notice. So what I like to do is start a conversation and say, okay, well, what does this even mean? If we're going to achieve this, what does this mean? And roundtable it. Because when you're called upon to say, okay, explain this to me, you kind of have to answer. And we all know engineers are not likely to volunteer to talk. Even product managers won't talk if they don't think there's a reason to talk, right? It can be more of a risk than a win. But the first thing is, do we actually understand what it is we're being asked to do? Number one, do we feel we have the tools to do what needs to be done? Or if we were allowed to plan it our way, what would we do first? So I try to cultivate those kinds of discussions in a workshop setting to drill into what do we all think this means? Because the first thing that you hear is the misunderstanding. 1 to 2 people speak, you start seeing people turning their heads saying, okay, that's not what I thought. And next thing you know, you've got a conversation going. Because if we have to build this and you think it's this and that guy thinks it's another thing, we have a problem.
What do you do with the quiet person in the corner? Well, not the corner, because probably maybe it's a meeting like what we're having right now. It's online and everybody's in a little like an avatar box on the screen. But like, how do you get the quiet ones?
Sometimes I give them the pen. So if we're in a room, we've got a whiteboard. Sometimes I'll get them to start as a facilitator. Like, okay, can you start writing this up for me? And then they're in the hot seat. Because then when you ask them a question, they're in front of the room. Sometimes I'll get those people to prepare in advance. Sometimes I'll just throw it at them. It kind of depends how much I know them and who they are, right? Because you don't want to force someone into a situation where they shut down because they're panicked. You want to prime them. So most often what I'll do is I'll just watch. Let the people who want to talk, wait for facial expressions, wait for fidgets, and then ask for input. Because most people are the quiet, what do they say? Still waters run deep. So you wait for the person who's been reserving judgment and let them hear from everyone else. Let them process and then hear what they have to say.
That was often me when I was starting out in my career. When I was still a developer, I remember kind of getting the reputation for being the quiet but profound one. I'd be in a meeting with a bunch of people, and I would be the only programmer in the room, and everybody would talk, and I would usually just let them talk, and I was kind of taking it all in and trying to listen, and then eventually there came the time when it's kind of like Byron's supposed to say something now, and that's when I was able to take all the things that I was mentally processing, the puzzle that I was putting together, and I could just give them the answer. But if they never gave me the opportunity to speak, I can look back on that and think of many problems that might have continued being problems if they hadn't gotten the developer in the room to speak. And I know you're talking about like you with a team of developers
as well,
though.
Executives, scenario, but distance themselves from the problem-solving process too often. If you're going to ask someone to do something, I'm not saying that this is always possible, but I think you owe a certain amount to your team to understand their process, understand their constraints, understand their blockers, understand their strengths and weaknesses and how they work as a team. What is their balance?
Yeah. I remember also this conversation is helping me remember some things that I guess I've buried after a while. There was a time when I was leading a team and I got them in with, it was a custom development shop. So we had a team of developers, and then we would have our client, which was like the product owner. And so they were coming into our meeting, to say, this is how I want the product to be, and this is where I want the button to be, and this is what I want it to do, and this is why, these are the business reasons and all that. And I remember having a really hard time starting out as a leader, trying to get my team to talk. And then after the meeting was over, or multiple meetings, I went back to my team and I was like, why aren't you all talking? There were all kinds of questions you could have been asking. And what I found out was that the team felt like the product owner had laid out the bits of information that they needed, and they were just going to fill in all the gaps. And they didn't want to ask anything because they thought there were two reasons. See what you think about these. One reason was because they thought the product owner, our client, was unqualified to answer the questions that they had. Maybe not. I mean, do I use this mail API, or do I build this thing over here? And the other one was they were afraid to reveal incompetence by asking questions or participating.
Those are basically your two leading answers, right? This person's an idiot. I'm going to let them finish speaking, and then I'm going to go do what I want to do because I'm right and I know better, and they're not going to notice. They'll get a result that they're happy with and that works, in my opinion. You could take that approach. And then there's okay, where do I even fit here? What right do I have to ask this? And I think that is more of a cultural issue. And I see it more in consulting, where people don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to say, okay, can you tell me more about that? Or they don't know how to probe for information without simply saying, I don't understand what you're saying. There is an art to questioning. There is an art to questioning a client, to say, tell me more about this. Or if you're with, what is your situation? What is your rhythm? What is your cadence for this operation? There are ways to ask it that make you feel less vulnerable, but are achieving the same thing. And I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, whenever you're in that situation where your core competency is technical and you're working with a diverse set of business stakeholders on different projects, it's inevitable that you will not know why that business process exists and why it works that way. I work with companies in fintech. I am not a financial expert. I like money. I use money. I don't really know a lot about finance. Same thing with biotech. I'm biological. I take medicines, things like that, but I don't know a ton, right? I don't know, let's say, about all the processes for bringing a drug to market. But if I'm going to help someone build that system, I need to understand how they do it. And I need to understand enough to go away, read, and then ask more questions. But I think that is very much cultural. Have you helped those teams know how to ask, understand that asking is good, and that it's, if nothing else, a sign of engagement, not foolishness. And we all come up in different ways, right?
Yeah.
We all have different corporate cultures, different home cultures, different school cultures. So you very often have to learn some of that through trial and error. Who will ask and who is too risky? Who's just going to say like, well, that's stupid. Because I have kicked a developer before under a table before having that person explain how stupid they thought the client was.
Yeah. But I'm sure you've experienced this too. But once we can kind of build a culture of good questions, good comments, interaction with a team, it really does kind of become magical when a team really has that open flow of communication between the product owners, the product managers, the team, even other branches of the team. Like QA is coming in testing. If they're doing it completely in silos, then it's a really ugly situation, and people are throwing things over the wall. Your DevOps people are over there trying to deploy something. If they're not communicating, then maybe the devs do something new in there that's going to completely wreck the DevOps pipeline. And just once you get people talking, the team really can start to have some amazing productivity and really turn out the best product, not just whatever we thought it was. This is really what the client needed, really what
that's the difference between what you get with humans versus AI. AI can execute a set of functions within boundaries based on previously ingested information and observed patterns, and it can do it over and over. But at the end of the day, it's a pipeline. It's just a pipeline, and things get handed from one component to another. When people work together, it needs to be messier. It needs to be less sequential. There needs to be more curiosity about, why do you keep sending me bugs like this? You know, help me. Like, why? Like, what am I doing? Like, what is it? Why is this important? Right? Or I reject these bugs that you send me because, just all of these things that are human to human, because you can put two QA testers next to each other with the same training, with the same guidance. You've got two individuals who see things differently. So how do you see the way it's supposed to work? That's a better question. And once you get people comfortable asking questions, they work so much better together when they realize everyone came in today probably to do a good job. Most of us didn't come in to coast, even if you might think it sometimes. Most of us, well, I don't think almost anyone comes in to do a bad job, right? Most of us came in with an idea of what our job was for the day, where our boundaries were organizationally, what our abilities are, and what we're supposed to do with our time. And we're just trying to get through that. And the more we cross-pollinate, the more that aligns into what we are here to do today, not what I'm here to do today.
So, as you know, this podcast is all about how to get people to flourish while they're on our teams, and how can we as tech leaders to promote human flourishing in our teams. So what does getting people to talk have to do with human flourishing? So we talked about how to make the company flourish, how to make the product flourish, how to make the team more productive, all of those great things. But let's focus on the team themselves. How does this, getting people to talk, help them to flourish?
It could be a lonely world, especially with remote work now. I mean, one of my best ever jobs, I had some of the biggest throwdown arguments of my life, some of the most idiotic pranks, some of the best cookies, and did some of the best work of my life. And that was where we actually got to know each other and invested in each other. And that didn't mean it was kumbaya. That didn't mean it was all hunky-dory, but it meant we really talked. And like I said, sometimes that meant we got into it with each other. I don't think this is right because, and we cross lines sometimes too, right? Sometimes you get too passionate. You have to apologize. But we got to know each other as people. We knew when this was, let's say a Greg problem versus an Anna problem. It's like, no. If someone's going to look at this, this is Anna. We need her brain on this. She's a wizard with systems like, it's not her job. Let's get her though. Let's just get her because we need her eyes. So that's the difference between being a cog in a machine and being part of a team that is achieving a thing. Because when you're all separate and you're not working together, you're just working on the same thing in sequence, even the way you say it is different. Let's face it, do you want to come to work, log on, start coding silently, have no one come in and say, hey, good morning, hey, what's up? Or can you look at this for me because I'm stuck? Or do you, want to just sit there alone and say, uh-oh, I don't know how to do it. How do I hide?
Well, so I'll be honest with you. And I actually hate that phrase because one time I heard somebody say, well, you should always be honest. And so I almost never say it, but I'm gonna come clean with you. And I'll say that there are days, when I was a programmer, it's not this way anymore because I just can't operate. I can't operate by myself anymore. I have to be a part of a team now. But when I was a programmer, there were days when I loved the idea of coming into work and sitting in my cubicle and not have any interaction at all because I could have so much productivity and get through. But as you say, you're always going to have times where you're going to hit a wall and you're going to need help. And if you are by yourself and you're not, or if you're just not, if your office culture doesn't have enough communication flying around, and hey, how you doing? Random interruptions and things like that, then it can get really really like a wretched
Yeah.
existence.
And I mean, you don't
So,
learn.
yeah,
And you
it's a
need some
balance, I
balance,
guess.
right? I mean, let's face it, personality types are a real thing, right? Like I, believe it or not, am on the introvert side. I need my days to go into
Yeah,
a
me too.
hole and to work through things. What I've learned is that I need them to be days, not weeks. Because when I go for weeks, I come out with a magnum opus, right? This is the greatest thing I've ever written. And then I show it to someone and they're like, but that's not right.
That's not what we
Like,
wanted.
didn't you know both? And so I've learned to be more iterative in my focus time.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the same with a strategy. I don't make a roadmap. I don't form a strategy. I don't do anything big bang anymore because I need to go bounce it off my team. So whether my role is vice president of who knows what, or just, individual contributor, I need to bounce these things off other people to get other perspectives. And I've learned that. I spent enough time earlier in my career down a rabbit hole thinking I was chasing the most important glitch, bug, feature to come up and have someone say, oh, you spent 2 weeks on that? Oh, that was like, we only cared if you could whack it in an hour, we cared. If you can't kill it in an hour, we don't care. And I've since told that to people. It's like, oh, you worked all night on that? I wish you'd talked to me because I would have told you that this is only worth about 2 hours to me. You can't whack it in 2 hours, bring it back to the team. We'll play Jeopardy and see what we can come up with. And then we'll toss it.
Such a good point. Such a good point. I have learned in my career to just absolutely, previously to hate estimates. But in the past, 3, 4, 5 years, I've learned to love estimates. And that's on the product owner side, right? I'm not as much developing anymore. And so now I love estimates, but I love them from a different perspective now. What you just said resonates so strongly. When you ask a developer, how long is that going to take? And they come back to you and say 3 days, but you were expecting to hear 2 hours or half a day or something like that. That is a gift. It's time to dig in and figure out what they think they're building and what you were expecting, and why is there a massive chasm between the two. And what those conversations have, they're gold, because instead of spending the software developer salary for 3 days on something that I wanted in 2 hours, we have a chance to stop that from happening and back up. Or maybe I just need to get educated.
Exactly.
Maybe I'm the one that's out of touch. But either way, my expectations are fixed, or their expectations are fixed. And
absolutely. And as a product manager, the last thing you want is to have someone misunderstand what you're looking for, either because you haven't illustrated it properly, you haven't communicated it properly, but more likely because you've been in a silo thinking deep thoughts about it, and now you assume everybody understands it, and then you hand it over to development with the most beautifully written requirements ever, and those words didn't hit the way you thought they would, like my secret decoder ring. Your words don't mean the same to other people as they may mean to you. And that's why examples matter. Discipline tests of, okay, what if we did this, right? And so I always try to, and it always happens every time I work with a new team. It's like, no. That sounds crazy. Just come back and say, Rachel, what party were you at last night? Because that makes no sense to me. My goal is to get them to the point where they're like, no, that does not make any sense. Let's talk.
Yeah. And so I'll bring it back to flourishing. I flourish as a product owner when I get my expectations adjusted to reality. So if this thing, maybe I'm just an old programmer. What do I know? This thing that would have taken me 2 hours, actually now, because of some new thing in React land, is actually going to take 3 days. And I mean, I might not like that, but if I can have a conversation with my developers and feel good, feel like they listened to me, I had a voice, On the other hand, my developers who maybe maybe they might be resentful of me that I think this thing takes 2 hours. How dare you, Mr. Product Owner? You're not even a developer. How dare you say that this thing should take 2 hours when obviously it should take 3 days? And so by having that conversation and getting them to talk, I am giving
Yes.
them a voice. And by giving them a voice, they flourish.
Absolutely. I mean, most of the people that I've worked with over the last 27 years in development, once I've gotten to know them, I found out they have remarkable creative talents. Because these are not people who just write code to achieve objective X. These are typically deep problem solvers, highly creative people, and it's a deep well. And I like to give them a chance to bring those talents forward. And then I feel much more confident about what I can ask for from the team. If they come to me and say, did you realize that every time you asked us to do something like this, we have to do these 19 things in this, interpretive dance style to make it work? That can change the way I write requirements. That can change the way I prioritize. One of the things I always try to get my teams to do once we've gelled is, okay, what's your roadmap? I have these business objectives for the product. You have to keep it healthy. What do you see that needs to happen? Because no executive is ever going to tell you, well, we should be upgrading this infrastructure because that will make us a more stable and robust platform in years to come. No, they want to get every feature out that they can to sell more and everything else. And they want all that stuff to just work. But every engineering leader will tell you it doesn't just all work. It's like your car. You need to give it gas. You need to change the oil. You need to change the brake pads. You need new tires. And if you don't have a technical roadmap that is carefully planned alongside your feature, function, quality roadmap, you are going to hit an end of the line. I've seen so many companies lose their market advantage because they pushed too far to the end of the technical line. And they had to take a big pause and do a big refactor. It's disruptive.
Is that because of the amount of technical debt that they had accumulated
Technical
over time?
debt accumulates, things go out of compliance, right? So maybe you were on AngularJS.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe you're on an older version of Java and you've got to get updated. It doesn't matter what it is. All technology has to be refreshed. I mean, we are still running COBOL systems in some places that haven't been updated, but you don't really want to pay the price of someone going in there to modify it. Last I heard, some of those guys were going for $2,500 an hour.
That's not, on a different subject, that sounds pretty nice. Do you think that by giving people a voice and trying to get them to talk, that tech leaders are maybe a little afraid of giving away some of their, not power is the wrong word, but like authority? Maybe they're just afraid of, like, if people voice an opinion, that all of a sudden, I've got to follow up with that somehow, or I've got to throw them a bone.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One of the companies I worked at, we actually had a CEO who loved it. He loved to hear it if people complained, because it meant they cared. So there's different ways to look at people giving you feedback and telling you things you don't want to hear. And I mean, if you've ever had to give unpleasant feedback to someone, it's a gift. When you put yourself out there to give critical feedback to someone that you're pretty sure is not going to like what you have to say, you're making an investment in that person. That's an investment in the situation or the person or the problem to say, I am putting myself out here. I'm being vulnerable because I care this much. So that's how I choose to see people giving me feedback. The situation I have created is either so intolerable or so critical, or they believe, it needs to be different so much that they're bothering to tell me. So I should respect that and take it as an investment. And it could be my fault. I'm just a human, and I will continue making mistakes and having victories, and probably, hopefully more of one than the other. But if you're not making mistakes, you're not making anything. So I think people sometimes feel that having made a mistake makes them somehow lesser. And I think that goes down even to people who want to give feedback or ask a question. They're afraid that by being vulnerable and possibly being wrong, that they will be perceived as less than. Typically, the people who do that I see as being the leaders. They were willing to step out of the comfort bubble and say something.
So what do you think tech leaders, when they're starting out, just trying to start down this road of getting people to talk, what do you think that some tech leaders are going to overlook, some pitfalls along the way that we can warn them about?
I mean, it's really easy, especially when you're in that climb, to get to the point of, I am the smartest person in the room. You know, we really have to avoid that. And oh my goodness, I've made that mistake multiple times, that I know I have, of no, but it would just be better if we did it this way. And the number of people who have saved my bacon by taking me aside or just straight up saying, yeah, no, or I am concerned about that, or I don't understand how that will work with this, regardless of how they said it. People have saved me by saying it. So I'm at the point where I have enough respect for that. But I think it's really important for leaders to own their failures publicly and to remind their teams that they are fallible and that they know they are fallible and that they will welcome the feedback. So I always try to tell people, like, here's some spectacular things I've screwed up and the way people have saved my bacon. And I find that at least lets them know that I know I can be wrong and I'm okay with being wrong. So if you tell me I'm wrong, I'm not going to be angry. Because let's face it, an executive is in a position of power. Doesn't matter what you say shouldn't be happening. There's always a power dynamic in any group of people. It's just reality. So the more you work to become human, to become transparent, and to respond positively to feedback, you know, what you say is not nearly as important as what you do. If you want people to trust you, you have to behave in a trustworthy manner.
I've been on this journey myself for the past, I don't know, like 10 years, trying to figure out how to get people to talk when I come to a meeting and I want their feedback. I want their ideas. I also want to hear their questions because I want to know that they have heard me. By hearing their questions, I can understand their depth of understanding of what we're talking about. And if they're not asking the right questions, then I know that there's still something missing from their understanding. So that, like, I want to give my team a voice because I want to know that I want them to flourish. That's part of who I am. But I also, I have to get a job done too. I have to build this product that my client is asking for, or something like that. And so I've been on this journey for a long time, just like you. One thing that I discovered early on is, I mean, I wanted to give them a voice, but I also spent a lot of time talking. And so one thing that I would have, if I could go in a time machine, go back and slap my past self around, I would say, look, you need to talk less.
Yep.
You need to, like, put the idea out there and then shut up and let people get used to asking for more details. Like, I used to think that I had to put out every single detail out there on the table,
Yeah.
and show how prepared I was, and make sure that everybody knew how competent I was, get all the questions out there, because I didn't want them to lack in any information. What I was doing was I was stifling their participation. I was quietening their voice because they didn't have a reason to talk.
Yeah.
I had already done it all for them. So that's something else I would throw out there for younger leaders is
Oh, absolutely.
talk less.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, actually. And it's hard. That was one of the first things I had to learn about public speaking was shut up and wait for the questions to come. It takes way longer than you want to sit, but they come because other people don't like the silence either. I also like to either get very specific and say, okay, let's look at this problem. Let's lay it out piece by piece and almost run it like you would in a classroom. What happens after we do this? Or play worst case scenario. So if we're going to do this, what can go wrong? Anything to get the wheels turning and force people to be part of developing the solution. Because I think it's very tempting for leaders to bring solutions instead of to bring problems, tools, and parameters, or problems in a blank slate where you say, if this is the problem, what might the parameters be? What might the constraints be? That's why I always like a workshop format rather than a presentation format, where everybody's told, okay, we're going to be working through this. You give them a 5-minute introduction, maybe bring a couple of great use cases, sharpen the pencils, and start working through. Because you have to talk when you're working through a problem.
Rachel, can you share about a time when getting your team to talk led to some unexpected results?
Yeah. This is actually an old one. But many years ago, we were working against a company who had put out an entire new product that did something really, really cool. And our customers were just begging for something similar. And I did the classic mid-tenure product manager thing. I researched it. I researched the competition. I became an expert. And I pitched it to my team. And back then, engineering would take it and they would go away and they would talk amongst themselves and they would bring it back to me. They came back, it's like, so we'd have to take the whole team for 18 months, Rachel. Sat there for a minute. That's it. But what if we just did this? And they showed me how, with a right-click option, they could give me 60% of what that other company had in a separate product in a 6-month time window with 2 developers. And it's like, I had never thought of it like that. I had thought of it in this definition that the market had given it. I hadn't thought about what the user was really trying to do, but they had thought about what the user was really trying to do. And I have never boiled the ocean on my requirements development again ever since, because what that group of people came up with of, well, if this is the problem, why couldn't this be a solution, was so powerful. And what it actually achieved in the market was that other product failed. We released it in 6 months for free as a right-click gesture, and no one needed to acquire a separate tool to do that anymore, because what they had was not everything the other product did, but it was good enough.
If you could guess, how much do you think your company saved in opportunity costs or developer wages, just from just listening to your developers?
10 people, 18 months. Because this is back in like quarterly shipping being fast, right? So
yeah,
10 people,
just $1 million.
$2 million?
Yeah, at least.
They probably saved $2 million at least. And then on the flip side, there was the opportunity. Because we went from, well, our competitor, you have to install a separate product and you have to buy a separate product. And back then you had to buy hardware. You have to manage a separate product. You have to train on it, blah, 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 blah. It's a capital project. Yeah, you right click. No, it's free. You just get the next upgrade. And we sold a ton. Yeah. We were leaders in the space, not because we were better, because we were more convenient and we had just enough. And that's just it. That has changed the way I work. And I should probably give a shout out in case Ralph listens. That was all you, Ralph.
Yeah. So this is a $1 million, $2 million. This is a multi-million-dollar concept that if we can, as leaders, if we can get our teams to talk, we can start to take advantage of all that genius in the room and build upon each other, and we can end up producing much bigger, better things with less. Yeah. And then and in the process, we're helping people to flourish.
Yes.
because they have a voice and they feel like they have ownership and a stake in what's built. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
I
Love
recently
it.
discovered one of my developers has a talent for user interface design. And that's simply because we changed our process. Now we begin everything with a spike. I bring a problem, we begin with a spike. We go research what we could do, what we should do, and then we come back and say, okay, from this, how are we going to build out our stories? Which part of this problem are we actually going to solve? It saves me a ton of time writing requirements, and it gives them an opportunity to be much more creative and to bring skills that nobody actually knew they had to the table, and things that after they've developed this feature, they might say, okay, I want to do that again, or yeah, I never want to do that again. I'm able to, but I never want to do it again. Whatever the case might be, you find out who they are.
So, assuming somebody is feeling pretty inspired by this conversation, and they're like, "Yes, okay, tomorrow I want to give people a voice. I want to get people to talk on my team." What should tech leaders do tomorrow to start promoting human flourishing in their teams with this?
Pick something small and actionable and work on it together. Do not push it down. Pick something specific, concrete, that you either understand and have questions about or don't understand at all, and ask someone to tell you what they think. How could it, tell them you're worried. Tell them you don't know how this can go. You don't know what'll happen, or you don't understand how this works. Try a few different approaches to see if you've got people who want to correct you when you're wrong, or if you've got people who want to help you when you're lost, or when you've got people who simply need an opportunity to talk because they're afraid to talk first. Find out who they are.
Sounds like an excellent time to schedule something, a specific time to talk through a certain thing with your team, like spin up a Miro board.
Yes.
Or
any
get into a room
collaborative
with a
tool.
whiteboard.
Even a slide will do. Doodle on a slide.
Yeah.
Doodle on the latest version of MS Paint, right? Just,
Yeah.
There's a reason why we like to write on the walls. We've been doing it since we learned that we could make marks on stone. So we do well when we share ideas visually. We do well when we collaborate. This is what is in our DNA, right? So don't let a computer prevent you from doing it. Find a way to do it with the computer, through the computer, on the wall, whatever it may be.
Rachel, this has been such a great conversation. I can't wait to see what happens from our audience when they go out and start to implement some of these things that we're talking about. It's going to change the world. Rachel, thanks for your time today, for your experience, and for sharing with us.
Thanks so much, Byron.
This has been another episode of the Team Amplifier podcast. Thanks for joining us. Now, get out there and be a team amplifier.